Welcome, everyone, to Los Libertinos podcast. I am your host, Carlos Abelard, and this is episode number 56. Our guest today is Drake Lundstrom. He's been here before. In the past, he did an episode with me where he had a little bit of pushback on a previous guest. Today, he's here to push back on the idea that Jews are to blame for the ills of everything. So if anybody wants to check out a more personal take on Drake and his story, check out episode number 25, which I'll put a link below. Welcome, Drake.
Howdy, howdy.
Yeah, man. So I just want to give a little bit of a background story to how this interview came to be, so the audience knows. And this interview is about 6 months in the making. We have our weekly Renegade University men's group where, sometimes you're on, different people are on, depending on their schedules. And it just happened that on this one Monday, the conversation had come up about the Jewish question, because Pete Quinones from the Pete Quinones show, he had a guest on Dr. E. Michael Jones. And, we were just talking about it, but everybody in the group was engaged. And I remember that was how I said, you know what, let me ask Pete if he'll do an interview with me to talk about some of this stuff. And he did. And so I talked to him about it. And then the next time we hung out again on one of our Monday episodes, we started talking again, and there was some pushback that you had. And I said, hey, you know what? This needs to be put on a podcast. But at the time, you had said, well, I'm not an expert. And I didn't care, but I understood why that vibe kind of comes out. I've had several people that say, well, they always do they always preference by saying, oh, I'm not an expert. Well, you know what? All you guys are smarter than me. So to me, you guys are experts. But you had said, well, let me read up a little bit more, and you'd hit me up. So a couple of weeks ago, you had hit me up because the Kanye West news had been mainstream about a lot of the things that he had been saying, and so you reached out and we set up this interview. So here we are. So with all of that being said, I think we should right off the bat, why not? Let's start off with a little bit of the Kanye stuff, just because that's the way we kind of got going here a little bit.
And I'd meant to be. I was ready earlier, and then I kind of dropped off my radar with a bunch of other stuff getting busy, and then the Kanye thing was like, oh shoot, this is back in the news. We should actually talk about it.
Dude, it was the right timing, man. It was the right timing because I don't put no pressure. It was like, hey, whenever you want, man, let's do it. So Kanye has said a lot of things, but the one thing that stuck out to me, which is a new narrative that I had not known about or have heard about, maybe just lightly, because sometimes you'll hear of these groups like the Black Israelites or the Black something like that. And so basically, he had put in a post, I can't be anti-Semitic because Black people are actually Jew. I had never heard that take. I had sent you a couple of videos on some stuff, and I don't know. Let's just start off there on what's going on with Kanye, or what's up with the homie.
Sure, I'll give a bit of my background first. So I am Jew-ish, just a little bit. So it is from my grandmother's and the mom's side. So I'm officially Jewish. I have on my kippah today. Me taking off. I don't really wear it normally. So I have some personal background, and then just, reading and being moderately knowledgeable. And I can answer your basic questions. And then eventually I'm just going to point you to like other places to get more of the questions answered. Kind of the differentiation, there's a few different groups of Jews. I believe Ashkenazi is kind of Eastern European. Sephardic is like the Arabic region of just after whatever point in history they all split. And then more recently, there's been kind of, I think it's less than 100 years old, the Black Hebrew Israelites have come around and said, hey, based on such and such evidence, we are the real Jews, not you guys. Maybe we're all Jews together. And honestly,
I don't know. You tell me about that.
No one really takes them seriously.
Oh
Like it's
shit.
kind
Okay.
of a well. Do you remember the what was the who was the boy in the Capitol steps at the Rally for Life that got yelled at by the Native American played the drums in his face?
Oh yeah, got the kid that got all the money, but there
Yeah.
was those Israelites in
Yes.
the background somewhere, right?
Yeah,
Or
so
they
they were
were.
the ones there because they will just like be on street corners protesting and yelling. So they were just like standing there yelling at the Native Americans, like, go back to your country, you suck. Like I don't know, lots like they're known for being on street corners in New York City and yelling racial slurs at everybody that comes by. Like that's what their group is most known for, which is
But
not.
Kanye isn't attaching himself to them, right? He's and I actually don't even really know what he's speaking of, other than I know I sent you like a video of some old footage of like some interviews, but in that video, the line that stuck out to me, and of course, geographically, the idea of what Africa and different regions are changes over time. But yeah, I mean, the story of Moses is in Egypt, and that to
Yeah.
me is considered like I guess North Africa or whatever, or so
Yep.
that that doesn't come off to me as, oh, I don't know why they would be completely dismissed if someone says, well, they came out of North Africa or something like that. I don't know. I mean, what is that? What do you say to something like that?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not to completely dismiss it. It's more of a that they have a alternate history because it's not just, oh yes, there are probably people of Jewish descent that live in Africa, almost definitely for sure, and there's no problem with someone being black and Jewish. It is more that they have this whole lineage and history of who came from where and why we are the only group of real Jews and the other Jews are not Jews, and like some other weird like kind of black power stuff mixed in. It's I'm not that well read on it, like I said, but that one, it's not taken very seriously. Kind of what Kanye was saying was a bit of a mix of a bunch of different weird things. Because, like, on one hand, Kanye was saying, like, putting on White Lives Matter, saying, hey, you shouldn't judge white people by the actions of some, you should look at them as individuals and all this. But then flipping to the reverse on kind of the Jewish question. Or he was kind of wandering back and forth in this in a few areas and kind of combining different things where it's like, if what he's saying about Jewish people are true, then shouldn't that apply to the black people that he's also saying are Jews? Is he saying there's different groups? Like it was really confused if I was going to like kind of summarize it. If you actually want to hear someone that knows more about that specific part of the argument, the Fifth Column podcast had an episode on it recently with Camille Foster that he knows what he's talking about and has a bit more of the history of that, and also kind of some of the what's the word, Nation of Islam stuff that got mixed in there a bit too, because Nation of Islam is a group really popular within Black America, or well organized. I don't think it's that many people are in it, but it's a significant group, and they have a history of being fairly anti-Semitic and not really big fans of Jews.
What does Semitic mean?
Uh, it is like the word for the Jewish people, so it would be like, and it'd be like saying anti-Mexican.
Okay,
So a
so they.
Semite is someone of Jewish, I believe it's Jewish or Arab descent. Like it's to descend of a certain region of the world, and that's what. So anti-Semitic is just generally, it's the equivalent of saying racist about Jews because there's the whole thing of,
But
are
if you
Jews
said, hold on,
race? Are they
hold on,
religion?
man. I mean, I'm talking to you like if we're like, but if you
Yeah,
just threw in because you said Jew
yeah,
ish, and then you said Arab,
yep.
and then so now it opened up to you just opened up another geographic area, but why doesn't that geographic area then go a little bit south to North Africa and that whole area being
Yeah.
Semitic or not, or yes
So
or no?
just the word just means
So the way we
what
understand it
just what
now, that's the way it is.
yeah. So what the word Semite meant was someone who speaks a Semitic language, Jews or Arabs, essentially. And just it's turned into being only about the Jews. Just if you're saying someone's an anti-Semite, you're not saying they're like anti-Muslim or anti an Arabic person. It just means anti-Jewish because words
Yeah.
Um,
And
I know that they just wanted a word specifically for this, especially because of the whole weird thing of like, are Jews a race or a religion? And it's just turned into anti-Semite is kind of the umbrella term for being against Judaism, whether it's against the race or the religion.
well, speak to that then. I don't know about that. I don't know what's up with that. Speak to that. Sure. I mean, we're gonna freestyle a lot, man, because stuff comes out. I'm gonna ask you questions about that. So what?
No, you're
So
good. So, Jews are both a race and religion, and kind of within race, there's also like a couple different races. So, kind of the Sephardic versus the Ashkenazi and other stuff. But essentially, um, Jews haven't really had a homeland for a while. So they've been wandering around different countries, different regions throughout the world for the past many thousands of years. And sometimes in Israel, sometimes not in Israel. Um, and they were very insular groups, as many groups in Europe used to be. So they would kind of inbreed. It would be the same group having a pretty distinct lineage over time. That you can look at someone's genes and say they are X% Ashkenazi Jew. It is a distinct biological group. Um, in the same way that you could say this person is German or has Gaelic ancestry or whatever else. It's kind of in that similar vein, and it is just how it separated um, the religion and the ethnic group went hand in hand. So there
is that
are
a unique thing to Jewish people in that the Jewish people, like you said, try to, I guess, breed or stay close because of their religion, like of their religion. So it just because that's what I'm trying to say. Like you're saying, it's hand
yeah.
in hand. Is that you? Is that maybe it's not just unique to them, but it's not very common.
Um it's not that unique to them in the sense that if you looked at like I don't know if it used to be if a Catholic tried to marry a Protestant, like both their families would like beat them, or like the Romeo and Juliet, or interracial marriage, white and black, or whatever else. Like this used to be a more common thing that you couldn't marry across these different groups, and the Jews in particular were more there were laws against them owning land. There were laws against them settling down or setting up certain kinds of stores. They generally traveled like as a small group. And this is a kind of thing that's common for a lot of groups that are minorities in other cultures, um, where they will be traveling around kind of as an ethnic enclave. And if the local population gets too pissed at them, they will leave because it turns out that if you are a traveling minority, people will attack you a bunch, like the Armenian genocide.
No, I don't know about that. Tell me about that, man.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
So the Ottoman Emperor. So okay, let me try to think of where to start from.
the only
So
thing I know about the Armenian genocide, if I'm right, is
mhm,
that the Kardashians uh, speak about that stuff. If I'm right, they're
yeah,
from Armenia. Like I don't know how it's attached to Jewish people, but I didn't know that. But
okay.
I know that there was
So
a genocide back in the day, and it was fucked up. Like people, I don't know about it, but I know everybody's like, oh, that was a fucked up one, you know?
I gotcha. So there's this concept called the middleman minority. This has been pushed kind of by Thomas Sowell, the main person writing about it. He actually has a piece from I think 2005 saying the piece is called something like "Is anti-Semitism generic?" And the argument that he makes is if you look at these groups around the world, the same thing has happened over and over. So if you have like Chinese people in Malaysia, and they're a minority in Malaysia, and they're a ethnically separated homogenous minority, so they all stay together and inbreed and like do business with each other, and they have taken up a sector in the economy, usually being traveling peddlers or moneylenders, because if you're not allowed to own land, you can't be a farmer. So you become someone that makes clothes or someone that travels, other skills. So you're forced into certain skills. Um, and those groups usually becoming very economically prosperous. And those groups, when things go bad, it's really easy for the local population to be convinced to hate them, because like imagine if you were in a town of a bunch of Americans and there came in this little group of Japanese people and they were
Hey,
making
hey,
a
why do
lot
they
more
got to be
money.
little? Why do they got to be little, dude?
Well, they're the minority.
I know. I'm just.
Hey, wow, Carlos.
Hey, don't worry. Hey,
Um,
Mexicans
yeah,
are short too. I thought I have to.
just like the Jews, exact same thing. Only short groups count for this. But what ends up happening is you have this tiny group, but they have a lot of money, and then things start going badly, and the government says, "We didn't screw up. It's those filthy Jews, those filthy Japanese people. They're the ones screwing things over and making your life bad. So you should blame them and not blame us, the government that actually fucked things over, or even like a natural disaster of like it. If the town starts all getting the bubonic plague, you're gonna be like, Jews poison the water supply. Let's go kill them."
I think one time you had talked about that term of like poison the well. Is that what you, I want to wait. Am I right or wrong there? Where you, I don't know if you mentioned that they were blamed for
yeah.
poisoning the well or some shit. No, am I right or wrong?
That's been a thing where a lot of times people have accused Jews of poisoning wells and then use that as an excuse to go kill a bunch of them.
Damn, that's fucked up.
It happens. But the other thing is that it happens to a bunch of groups, and ironically, some of these times with these groups these groups are so important to like the economy that when the local population turns on them and drives them out, they fuck themselves over. And the Armenian genocide was an example of this in the Ottoman Empire in the like 1890s. The Ottoman Empire was like, well, these Armenians are obviously the cause of all our problems. Let's go kill them. And they killed, might look it up, I think a few 100,000 Armenians.
Okay.
It's just like, hey, they're a minority and they're too successful and things are going badly. I guess it's their fault.
So okay, so let's I'm bringing in a lot of my knowledge on I have always heard some of the typical stereotypes from comedians and jokes and stuff like that, and I'm bringing this up because this one ties in a little bit to what you're saying right now, and I'm trying to tie it nicely into something that's maybe I could put it together. So because the Jewish people were a wandering people that had no, like, I guess, nation state or had no, because of the religion, right? Because they were like, oh, you guys are tribes now, right? Or something like that. You're like, God sent them to be wandering around, something like that, right? It has to do with the religions, right? And then,
yeah, so then partially because like Jews are a little bit racist,
okay,
and think like the Torah says we are God's chosen people. Like we are supposed to stay in our communities, and like there are a lot of Jews that believe you can't convert to Judaism. Even someone that tries is never a real Jew. And it's like, no, so we should stay within our communities. And so, because there are groups that have traveled to other countries, like Irish to the US, where over time they started inbreeding and kind of disappeared as a group. It's the groups that stayed as no, we are all Armenians, we are all Gypsies, we are all Jews, whatever groups that like stayed together are the ones that end up having a lot more of the animosity because people are like, they are separate, they are other than us. Which is partially because, and the thing is with like the Chinese, they had this issue in some countries, but they also had China to fall back on. Because like, sure, they were discriminated against and whatever when they were in Malaysia or when they were in every other country. But when they were in China, they were fine because, Chinese people in China are kind of fine. Where like the Jews didn't have as much of that to fall back on, so they had more. They were the minority middleman more often because of this.
So then the reason I had brought up was that, oh man, I already forgot the term, but I know you know it. The pogra. Okay, so say it again. Pogroms. Okay.
GROM.
So I had never heard of that until when I interviewed Pete, and Pete being Pete and just making a joke had said something to the effect of like, well, if I had 190 ex-girlfriends, maybe I'm the asshole. And I get it, it's a joke, right? And he's speaking to this, but what you're trying to say is that he's speaking to the narrative of that, or he's not including in that joke or the narrative that the Jewish people just seem to be like you said, the most common middleman in whether it's Europe or Middle East or whatever you want to call it, because they're like you said right now too, like they just stick with their own more for religious reasons or to try to stay more pure because they're a little racist and they want to keep the bloodline or the blood tight of saying that they're the chosen people of God. Is that kind of is that what it is? Like, am I putting it
Yeah.
together? Am I kind of putting it together in my own mind right a little bit, or what am I missing there?
Yeah, you're mostly there. I just also want to add the clarification. So when people are talking about stuff about Jews, to avoid getting canceled, it is often a really common thing to like say things as jokes or just asking questions or whatever. Which makes it hard to have the conversation. Because like I don't think Pete's an anti-Semite. I think that he is totally legitimate to ask the Jewish question, which is like, hey, why are so many Jewish people in positions of authority? And even when he was on your interview, like he mentioned the same minority middleman thing that like, and kind of, I think that what you should be doing is going forth and directly answering the question, which is like, yeah, no, sure, the 109 ex-girlfriend thing, but it wasn't, it's like, okay, you have 109 ex-girlfriends, and that's awful, and so you're the asshole. However, what if it's not you and the girlfriends? What if it's a situation? What if it's like every single time you get a girlfriend, it turns out that she has another guy and she's cheating on him with you? Like, well, you're gonna run into a fight every time then. So it's like situational, where because the Jews are the minority in that situation, like the minority acting economically in that situation, there's going to be a conflict. And every group in that situation has a conflict. So it's not something exclusive to Jews. It's something that every group in that situation has. And I'm doing a really bad job with this metaphor. But it's like just trying to clarify, it's not the Jews, it is the situation of being an economic minority than is the moneylenders and the peddlers and the traveling merchants and whatever else, which means people are going to hate you and blame you and end up, whenever people start getting sick from a plague, they're going to say you're the witch and burn you at the stake.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Just wanted to tell you about our sponsor. It is Paloma Verde CBD from palomaverdecbd.com. It's a small business that my wife and I own. And we want to tell you about some new products that we have. Well, especially one. Uh, check it out. These little homies right here, 5 milligrams of Delta 9 in each one. Um, the story behind some of these was that when we were first trying them out from our supplier, I took 2 of them, and I remember telling my wife, you know, I like to drink, right? If you're watching this episode, you see I have a little glass of tequila with me there, and we're gonna watch our late night movies, is where we usually do our hangouts, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to drink. I'm kind of feeling these gummies coming up a little bit, and yeah, no, these things get you high. Okay, so get yourself some of these for sure. And then that's funny. And then when we had them, we were just going at a party, right? My wife's party about a month ago. Everybody that wanted some got some. And usually these parties are, you know, as a host of a party, we always like to party. You always got to make sure who has drinks. Everybody's having fun. You know, you're hosting. You know. And on this one, it was different, where some friends came in later on and they're like, why is the party all kind of mellow? And we told them, we gave everybody samples of our new Delta 9 5 milligram gummies, and everybody was mellow, man. It was a trip. I remember just everybody was playing pool, listening to the music kind of low. Everybody was getting, it was cool. So get these 5 milligram THC gummies at palomaverdecbd.com. Use the promo code Chingasos, CHINGASOS, for 20% off of your order, and support the show and small business. Thank you. Okay. So then that then leads into a little bit more of what Kanye was saying, in that
Yeah.
he was then saying like, hey, the Jewish people, they're in finance and media and different things like that. And I remember too when and I think we even talked about this in the men's group, and you know, I'm not a hater, like I'm like, hey, that's good, you know? I mean, you know, I understand that. I mean, if you can put your people in in places of power and media and banking. I mean, that makes a lot of sense if you care about trying to stick, keep together and all that. And Kanye kind of spoke to that, but why is it? And this is what could be said a little bit, is that if the narrative isn't nice and tight about, if you speak outside of like, uh, not outside of it, but man, just kind of like question a little bit of it, it becomes that you're an anti-Semite, or
Yeah.
even when I heard him say some of that, my brain went into like, oh, I think, he didn't come out and say, oh, I appreciate it, but kind of that vibe, that was kind of in his vibe, was like, hey, I mean, like, he didn't speak of it in a bad, anyway. What I'm trying to say is, like, he's also speaking to that without maybe knowing that about the middleman concept that you're saying. And maybe because yes, I mean, I don't think you would disagree that, yeah, there's a lot of people in media and banking and stuff that are of Jewish descent, but so what, okay, that's fine, that's it. There's lineages of, they pass down a bunch of this, it passes down from generation to generation, and they know how to keep it in the family and all that, like, good for them. But if you say that, I don't know why it comes off as, it can, like, to somebody it can come off as, oh, you're like, I don't even know, somebody can be watching this interview and can be like, oh, Carlos is anti or anti. No, I'm not. I'm just saying, like, that's good for them, but like, why, if you kind of speak like this, it automatically turns into that, like, there's like an automatic, like, oh, you can't just say something like that. Or even if you say something against, oh, you know what, like, for instance, like me, like, I'll look at the state of Israel just like another state, like, whatever, like, I don't really, I mean, I care what happens in that region because it's tied to our foreign policy, but I wish I didn't have to care about that region because it's tied to our foreign policy. I wish that it was just like any other country that I don't care about. But if you say something like that, that comes off as, oh, you must be anti, So what is it about when you speak out of that narrative that the media that is somewhat, or that has these people in power that are Jewish descent, that's not allowed or something, or that's just me thinking that, and maybe it is allowed and you can't say it, but maybe it's I don't know, man. Well, I'm freestyling a little bit, but what do you think on that, man? There's a
The
lot there, a little
answer's
bit.
complicated. Yeah. I'm gonna try to unpack it a little bit. So first, I'm gonna give an example of an argument very similar to what Kanye said. Which, let's say there's a group. This group has historically oppressed Black people. They are overrepresented proportionally in Fortune 500 companies. They're overrepresented in Congress. They're overrepresented in billionaires and CEOs. And like the legal system favors them. They are more likely to get jobs, whatever else. And the thing I'm describing right there is like the left's concept of white privilege. And it's similar to what Kanye's saying, because like there is a thing for many people on the left where it's like, well, whiteness is an inherent thing, and your whiteness means you are inherently racist and never pass it. So like there's a very similar racist thing on the left about other things that is unlike some of it's applied to Jews, but it's you have the same answer there, as in there's a lot of like there's more reasons than just the race behind where people end up where they are. So kind of like, oh, like the reason Jews aren't banking isn't because like some evil conspiracy, it's because of the history of like Jews being the group allowed to do money lending where Christians weren't, and there's a whole thing in the Talmud, and we need to get back around to it at some point. And I lost track of where I was going. So when Kanye is kind of responding to this, part of it is like a reasonable thing coming from the Black community, because there's been a lot of fights between the Black community and the Jewish community in the U.S.
Oh,
Because
I didn't know that, for real. I don't know. I didn't know they have
lots of
beef.
fights.
They have some beef. Or what is it? I don't know about that.
So the when you're on, so the big benefit of being middleman minority is that the big downside is you're not part of polite society and people don't like you, right? Like, I mean, my mom was Jewish, and she moved to Ohio in like the 90s. And when she tried to join a country club, she was told no Jews and Blacks allowed.
Even,
Like,
in the 90s, even then, that's funny.
yeah,
It's fucked up.
yeah. And so it's like, okay, well, you're not allowed in polite society. You know what the big benefit of being that minority is? You're not allowed in polite society. And so you can take opportunities that no one else can take. So let's say you have a genre of music that's becoming really popular and it's going to make you lots of money, but um all of the good people hate it. They won't accept it. They won't touch a 10-foot pole. They're going to the government to try to put parental advisory labels on it. And they're trying to ban hip hop because they hate it so much because it's all the worst things in the world. Well, no white producer would ever touch it because it is socially toxic for you to be producing music about violence or sex, or whatever else. So, who has enough money to like finance this and the business skills to like run this, but is also politically on the outside and not bound by the constraints of polite society? Jews.
Hmm.
Because like because you have to be economically well off enough to be able to produce it, but you also need to like not care what society thinks about you. Um which is kind of why Jews ended up in like music producing, especially for like not polite music, like things that like anything from more sexual music to more violent music, whatever else, but also like how Jews end up in porn. It's like, okay, there's a lot of money to be made here, but if you are a nice Christian boy, this would destroy you socially to do. But if you're a Jew, you're already destroyed socially, so there's nothing to lose.
I like that. Okay, see,
Yeah,
I had not heard that angle,
yeah,
which is like I tend to fall in the camp of kind of like taking things economically more than I don't know, whatever, like stereotyping. Even though, the stereotyping stuff is just for fun, man, or just funny. I know it's fucked up, but it
yeah,
just, I just have a comedic mind or spirit, so I'm just always gonna like, I
yeah.
don't got no beef if someone says some shit about Mexico. It's fun. It's no big deal. But no, man, I had never heard that angle. But now that makes sense because there's a lot of the producers that with the rap like like Beastie Boys are Jewish. I never knew that shit until like later on. I didn't know that they were like Jewish kids that played punk rock, and they probably were like, hey, we got a little bit of flow. Let's just do some of this music, and we'll just be some of these white or like I'm thinking. I don't know if I'm right, but I'm thinking that that producer, that Rick Rubin, I'm assuming he's Jewish. I could be wrong. Okay, he did a lot of like the
Yeah.
older like a lot of that rap stuff. For man, I've already forgot the bands. I'm thinking he's Jewish. I could be wrong. People can be like, oh, that dude's not even a Jew. But yeah. But okay, but then I had never heard
But
the porno angle, because the porno one is the angle that some people will take. Not some people, that I've heard where, hey, uh one of the reasons, and this was on a new episode where my homie Justin Campbell had Pete on, and it was about the book burnings, Nazi book burnings, and it was about like oh, people don't really talk about what kind of books they were burning, but it was all like sexual stuff and very outside the norm kind of sexual stuff, and but it doesn't just start, the porn and Jewish or that type of stuff doesn't just start in like the porn industry from like whatever the 40s, 30s, or 40s, 50s, whatever that it started. That narrative's been around for a long time, but it's been around a long time because it's the same. How we're talking about the situation between the girlfriend and the boy, the same situation, whether it's in the 60s or 50s, there's probably the same situational circumstance in the whatever 1800s, 1700s. Like when you're the outside group, you're just gonna get into some shit that's a little bit on the darker side. Okay, well, I
yeah.
never.
Well,
Okay,
no.
I mean that makes sense to me. I mean that makes a lot of sense to me.
And that's where you also run into there's kind of the difference between left wing anti-Semitism and right wing anti-Semitism. Because the left wing anti-Semitism ends up with like, okay, you're a black rapper, you want to get ahead. The only producer that will work with you are like these three Jewish producers. And you know what? They're the only option you have. They're gonna fuck you over on the contracts. They
That's where
make
the
you.
beef came in.
That's where the beef came in. So you can find, and then especially Nation of Islam is also like really big in that group, and they had a lot of fun here. I pulled some quotes in advance of like you can go back and find like Public Enemy, a quote from a guy Public Enemy: "Jews are wicked, and we can prove this."
Mm.
Like, or let's see, Ice Cube, or just like if you look up a history of like anti-Semitism in rappers, especially in the 90s. You will find lots of it. And a lot of it was because like they're fighting the man, and like the Jewish producers had like kind of predatory contracts with them, but it's also like they were the only people willing to give them any contracts.
Yeah, so
So
there was a risk written into the contract, capital risk, like their capital was being risked, and it was written into the contract.
yeah,
You know, as somebody that that's not my style. I wouldn't. I would want everybody to win, but I also understand how somebody can write a contract and you still give fair warning to, you know, how do you want to say it, the black person that, you know, because I'm sure you know, what becomes predatory or fucked up is like if they don't even give them a heads up, like, hey, maybe you should talk to a lawyer before you sign this. Now, you know, if they just said, hey, sign it right here without even reading it, I don't know, man, that's kind of fucked up. So I
yeah,
don't know what happens in these things, but like, you
I
know,
don't know enough either about
yeah,
like
yeah,
the
yeah,
history
yeah.
of it.
Okay,
Just I
so
know
you know,
enough
eh, eh,
enough rappers were pissed that you can literally go in the songs, and in the songs they will say stuff about how like Jews are liars and they crucified me like Christ or whatever else, like in the songs. So it's like that was a big part of the beef, and that kind of like is part of where it like got to with Kanye, of like seeing that similar thing. And the
so the
interesting thing is
lineage
the
is not even going far back as into Africa. The lineage is probably just going into rap contracts.
that's like a big part of it, but it goes a little bit farther back to like Nation of Islam starting, and then kind of Black Hebrew Israelites kind of spinning off from there. But the interesting thing is there's left-wing anti-Semitism, which is almost saying um white people, privilege and power, like that kind of capitalist thing is bad, and the people that exploit others capitalistically is bad, and the Jews are like ultra white and the biggest exploiters of everybody. And then there's the right wing anti-Semitism, which is like Jews are not white and they are against whites and destroying whites.
Oh yeah, okay,
So the,
sure, I could see that.
and then you see here how it's like they're different criticisms. Sometimes there's overlap, but like they're like because the blacks will be like, hey, or the left will be like, oh my goodness, how could Jewish producers exploit Cardi B or someone? And then the right wing is going to be like, oh my goodness, look at these Jews pushing Cardi B's music everywhere and destroying
Um,
the culture. And I'm like, pick one, please. Like
so
one or the other.
the two sides are almost not touching the middleman. They're
Yeah.
going on the extremes, right?
Yeah.
And they're just skipping over that there's just the middleman making the deal, and they're going to the. That's funny, man. It's a
Yeah.
different way of looking at it, like that from both sides, like from the extremes. Oh, not you know, from the both
Yeah.
sides.
And you just run into this issue where it's like, okay. And you run into other weird stuff too. Like the one with the whole Jews like in the porn industry, destroy the white race. It's like so on one hand, there are cases where there has been like Jews. Okay, actually, I'm gonna rewind the clock a bunch.
Yeah,
So
do it freestyle.
pogroms. Like I didn't like Pete's definition, which was like what is it? A rebellion against. Yeah, I pulled the quote somewhere. Like saying it's the country rebelling against the Jewish population that's in control there. I'm like, it's essentially just a lynch mob. Like it's not really rebellion, especially because the thing that the when you look up the definition of a pogrom, what makes them a pogrom specifically, is that the government itself was either doing it or ignoring it. Like a lynch mob in the South, I mean, usually the government would ignore it, but you didn't. I guess some. No. Okay, to be fair, there were a decent number of cases where it was actually the sheriff and like the townspeople doing it. But like that was kind of the history of pogroms, is that happening, and like the amount of people killed in it is a lot more than kind of in the U.S. The U.S. is usually pretty good on this stuff in terms of not being that much racist death, except the Native Americans. Um, but like with pogroms, it was going and killing people because of blaming the Jews for whatever went wrong. So I mean, anything from the Spanish Inquisition, which was like what 300 years of going after the Jews for not being Christians, to like later stuff of bubonic plague means the Jews caused it. Whatever else happens means the Jews or whatever other minority caused it. And the hard thing for the Jews was fighting back makes things worse. There's this really neat podcast called Marytr. He does long form history things, and he has like a 6-part series on the lead up to the founding of Israel. So just like kind of the time before it. And like I would recommend listening just like to understand, going through some examples of how you are this like poor Jewish community in a slum outside the city, and the crop harvest failed, and now you have 1,000 people marching in your part of town, and they've like killed 15 people, and you're a little boy, and they drag your mother out, and they like beat and rape your mom in front of you. And if you fight back, that will mean all 300 people die in your town. So like you literally have to let them do the worst things to you or to your family, because if you fight back, then they will do even more to you. And it created a group of like really bitter, angry, hostile Jews. And then came along ideas like socialism that said, hey, this system is broken and corrupt, and we're going to overthrow it and make a better system. And it's like, fuck yeah, sign me up. I hate this system. So that's kind of like why you get groups that are on the minorities, in the minorities on the outskirts, that will sign up for like more revolutionary groups bent on overthrowing things. Historically, not just the Jews, but lots of them.
Okay, so you said socialism, or let's just say, wait, hold on. So Karl Marx created, or a lot of his influence to creating like communism, or those lineages of that type of political thought, was because of past history
Marx.
from
Not Marx. So Marx just like wrote his theory in a vacuum, and he was just kind of a weird idiot in a shed that was like mooching off of his friend that probably wrote half his books. But then Marxism kind of disappeared, and then the Bolsheviks and Stalin came along, and they were essentially revived Marxism, because Marxism had even died out as a form of socialism. But when the socialist people were organizing, they said, hey, have you been screwed over by this system? We want to change the system. And essentially got lots of Jews on board. And that's why you had a disproportionately high number of Jews in the secret police. But it's similar to the US. So in the US, there were a lot of Black people that were screwed over by Jim Crow, by slavery, by whatever else. So in like the 50s and 60s, there were these socialists, and they said, America's capitalist system is evil, and we are going to overthrow it and stop people from being bad to you. And a bunch of Black people like joined the Black Panthers, the Weather Underground, and they went around the country murdering cops and would set off bombs in major cities weekly for a decade. And it's like, is it because Blacks are inherently some like disproposed, like gonna more revolutionary or whatever, like more animalistic? No, it's that if you saw your mom get killed and someone says, hey, we're gonna go fight the people that killed your mom, you'll sign up.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So that's that's how you counter. Yeah, that's how you're countering the claim, like, oh, Jewish people are the ones that, yeah, created like the revolution in Russia or this or that. Yeah, but it just happens that they were just over. That they had more numbers of them, so it comes off like it was them. But what you're saying, I mean, you were saying is, yeah, it was that, like they were a part of that group, but they have what is it called? They had some reasoning behind it, of violence behind that, of why they joined these groups up, just like the Black people, like you're saying right now, just
and there was some other more complicated stuff too that I'm not giving the full nuance, but it's also like they were a bigger part of the secret police, but they weren't a bigger part of the people actually in power. And as soon as the communists got in power, they just went and killed all the Jews anyways. Like leftists killed Jews just as much as right wingers, or probably even more. Like my great grandmother fled from Russia because the Russians were like killing Jews. So like that. So it wasn't like like this is a Jewish group. And there's also some other weird stuff. Like here's a fun one. So there were people trying to fight to create Israel because they're like, oh, we want to have a Jewish state there to protect us. Ironically, they got really worried because when the U.S. started forming up, the U.S. was actually so like kind to Jews. They were like, oh, we don't actually need a Jewish state anymore. So they were like trying to push for it really hard. But there was one Jewish diplomat in particular that got really successful because he created an invention that made Britain do a lot better in World War I. It was something to do with creating gunpowder. I don't remember exactly what. But he essentially got the ear of a lot of the people in the British government. And like people in the British government, Woodrow Wilson and whoever else, were kind of like weren't that big a fan of Jews and had a lot of conspiracy theories about Jews running Russia and running the world, whatever else. And what was the name of the?
So those same narratives don't just stay in the lower class; they go into the high class of political, whatever Those okay. So even the presidents have these stereotypes or narratives of like the Jewish people, right?
And I'm forgetting the name of the British prime minister at the time. It was the this is a very famous one, right? With the World Wars. I don't remember his name. But what ended up happening is with the Jewish guy negotiating with him, Jews had almost no power at the time. There were a couple of like families of rich Jews, but it's similar to like saying, oh, there's some white Fortune 500 executives. Well, I'm not one of them, so I don't have that much power. Most Jews didn't have any power. But he went in and at the negotiating table with the British said, hey, can you give us Israel? And they're like, why would we give you Israel? And he's like, well, you know how you believe the Jews control Russia and the US, whatever else? You're right. The Jews control everything. And if you don't do what I say, I'm going to tell the Jews in Russia that Russia shouldn't ally with you, whatever else. So literally, he used the conspiracy theories about the Jews running everything as a bargaining chip to say, well, we do run everything, so give us what we want, or else. And that's actually one of the things propagating the like.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That's I mean, it's a good move, but then it feeds into like it's the biggest feeder of like.
Because you can find a famous Jewish person quoted as saying the Jews secretly run Russia. It's like he was lying. It's called negotiating.
I had never heard that one, dude. I had never heard that one. Is that when you talk about is that the what is they call the protocol? That's not the protocols of Zion or what is? Oh no.
I've heard of that.
No, not the protocols. What is it called? The Balfour Declaration.
The one that declared that Israel that Jews would get Israel. Then that whole
is that what, but that's the end goal, right? That was them giving Palestine over to start the migration and all that stuff or legalize.
Yeah, and it was a whole thing. Honestly, if you're going to look at the biggest group that caused the Israel-Palestine conflict, blame the British. Blame the British for everything. They literally took the same chunk of land and promised it to 4 different groups of people. They were just giving out any promise they could to get people to help them in the war. And they didn't intend to keep any of it. They promised the land to the Palestinians and to the Jews and to the French and to somebody else I don't even remember. They just made every promise behind closed doors to get people to support them in the war. It's like, well, that's lovely.
Well, so now that we're on the topic of that region, so let me give you my take on that region because this is just the way I just know it as of right now. From when I really started paying attention, I guess mid-20s. So I'm 39 now. To me, Palestine has just been the underdog. So I've always just seen. I'm like, oh man, that's fucked up. Or like I'll see the maps too of like, I don't really get into it, but I just the maps of like, hey, there's more settlements and they just keep taking land and then I remember I still even if I was in my mid 20s or even not what some of my oldest Palestine Jewish Israeli Jewish Palestine stuff was I remember even in the Clinton years because I would have been I don't know how old but I just remember like I remember seeing somewhere in the news where I think in that time in the 90s they negotiated something where they're like no you actually some of these settlements you are getting off of some like they got some and I guess I remember in the news it might have even been man like in like Univision or Spanish I don't even know where but like these Jewish people were like they didn't want to give up their settlements and who knows man it might have even been I don't know but I remember back in the 90s they're like oh there's beef about these settlements And I remember just like vaguely just hearing about it, not really caring, but I know it was on the news. So, but I over time, I just always, and even until now, I just see that there's one side that is the chingon in that relationship, and they don't let up. But I also understand that the underdog, or whatever I consider the underdog, the Palestinians, they don't let up either, and there's always going to be tensions because yeah, the narrative is that you can't just keep throwing rockets or this or that. But I respect someone like Scott Horton, and he's spoken to this a little bit, and he kind of also gives the vibe that like, hey, there's one, the Israelis are the ones that are playing a little bit harder and a little dirtier on this fight. But man, I don't know. You tell me, like, what is your kind of take on all this? It's not an easy thing to, but I don't know. Maybe it is, and I've just never heard a different take on it.
No, it's all a clusterfuck of I wish the Jews had just ended up in like a different country originally and not like Israel, just like some other land would have solved a lot of fights, because that was kind of the thing. It's like the Jews had nowhere to go. So they like, you're jumping out of a burning building, you land on a guy. Well, but like, sure, you need to jump out of the building. And if you hadn't landed on the guy, you would have died. But you did land on a guy, and now you're like both in a bad situation where it is like, does Hamas do like some bad stuff also? Yeah, but Israel also does some bad stuff and has like, the people in the Gaza Strip, they can't vote for like the overall government of Israel, even though Israel says they're control of them. They can't leave. Like Israel was saying, we won't let you have more than a certain amount of food per day, and like they were restricting their calories to keep them starved and all this stuff. But then there's also the stuff about the countries in the area threatening Israel, and it's like, I generally lean more towards the Palestine side, but it's like it's all kind of fucked there a bit.
So
and a big hope would be peace, but it is also like Israel's generally not been a fan of kind of having there have been a couple of like variations of UN solutions for it, but one side or the other has always broken them. And then also now, like to the degree Israel wants to have a one-state solution, it would then have to actually give voting rights to the Palestinians, but then it would be roughly equal in terms of voting blocks between Muslims and Jews, and Israel would much rather have a strong majority Jewish voting group, and they've kind of been doing lots of gerrymandering to keep that up.
hey, what's up, guys? Just wanted to let you know about a podcast that I've been jamming for about a year now. It's called the Morning After Podcast. It plays at 7:30 Central, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Justin and the crew, Matt, Dag, and Clyde are my gringo homies that man, they put a cool spin on the topics of the day. It's meant to be a light show with serious topics, but they put their gringo spin on it. And yeah, I mean, for sure, it's a little edgy. If that's not your vibe, don't check them out. But if you like to have a laugh and maybe catch me on the chats there, for sure, tune in to the Morning After Podcast. I'll put a link at the bottom. Please go hit subscribe on them, check them out, and support our sponsor. And see you there. Peace. There's gonna be some people in my audience that have maybe heard this term, but probably not. I know I would think if I told my sister that watches the show, or some aunt, if I go, hey, do you know what Zionism is? They're gonna just shrug their shoulders and be like, what? Like they never even heard of that. Can you kind of speak to Zionism? Because as far as I understood it, it's part of their agenda to have strategically, how right now you said, oh, I wish they would have ended up in another piece of property.
Yeah,
but it wasn't, because they wanted that, right? Because they want the return of the original Messiah, right? The original Messiah.
Yep,
okay.
It's that the Israel is the homeland of the Jews, and Jews have a God-given right to own that land.
That's really simple.
Oversimplify it. Yep.
And they do whatever they got to do, and even if they have to like placate to Christian Zionism, right? That I've always thought that one was kind of weird, man. The Christian one, because I was like, wait a minute, you guys, the Christian ones, or at least this is the way I understood it, man. You can tell me if I'm wrong, man. But because here in San Antonio, we have this Vato. He's like a Christian one, a Christian Zionist. He's a oh fuck, I forgot his name. The church here is called Cornerstone, but he's like a he has a lot of power, like in like Texas Republican. He's a big donor.
Yep.
Hagee, Pastor Hagee, I think, or what the fuck, I forgot his name. Anyway, I always found that one weird. I was like, wait a minute, you guys want Israel to exist because Jesus is gonna come back there. But then I was like, but they don't like Jesus, or not that they don't, they're waiting for their original savior. I was like, it just feels like there's a conflict, right? Or am I wrong, right? Because the Christians want Christ, Jesus Christ, to come back there, right? Or like, that's
Yeah.
where he's gonna come back, and then I don't know. I don't know. Tell me the whole story, or what am I getting right or wrong, or what is it about Christian Zionism and Zionism? Because
Yeah.
it does play a big part in I guess foreign policy and foreign aid to that region, and again a little bit to like if you were to speak out if against hey, I don't like the foreign policy of Israel or something like that, you could be depending on how you said it, or could be like, hey, you're an anti, like you can get, I wouldn't say canceled, but
Yeah.
like, yeah, you could
No,
get like
that's right.
you can get turned down a little bit, and so I don't know, I guess freestyle a little bit on that, a little bit on the Zionism and Christian Zionism, the foreign
Yep.
policy connected to it, like all of these different aspects that part, because they are a part of whether my sister knows it or not, it is a part of our foreign policy, and a lot of that, and
Yeah.
especially like in, I guess, Republican circles and even left wing. I guess. I guess you're telling me now too.
Yeah.
Even like the left and the right kind of are meshed together into some of this Jewish stuff. But anyway, go ahead, man. Freestyle a little bit on that.
I'm gonna half answer it and then answer the question I want to
All right,
ask.
go for it, man. Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so Zionism generally is the idea that the Jews should occupy, control Israel. Some Jews want to do it because they believe we have a God-given right to this land, especially Orthodox Jews. It's also interesting. People like say, oh, like that's one of the things like E. Michael Jones was saying. It's like, oh, Jews have this revolutionary spirit and they all are fundamentally against logos, whatever things. It's like Jews are also still very different blocks. Like Orthodox Jews, vast majority think we religiously own this land. We're kind of like unaffiliated Jews. Most of them don't. Um, and the reason that some Christian sects are kind of Zionist is that they think according to what the Bible says, one of the steps towards Jesus returning is that the Jews control Israel and Jerusalem. So it's not a conflict at all. It's just like the Jews, one thing, they control the land for one reason, and then these groups of Christians think only when the Jews control the land will the Messiah return for a second time and bring about all the end of the world in a good way, because the way the rapture and all that's supposed to be a good thing that makes everything happy, better forever. Um, but I think the interesting switch here that I'm going to totally turn around is the conflation with anti-Semitism and criticism of Israel, which I think is a very bad one for Jews. I think it doesn't do us any favors. I think it's a really hard, bad thing. So I'm going to give some examples of a similar thing with this. So for a while, it was said, if you would mention Muslim extremists, Muslim terrorism, that meant you were anti-Muslim, that you were like what's not Muslimophobe, it's
Islamophobic.
Islamophobic, that you were Islamophobic. Or if you want to bring up something about the trans kids debate, you're homophobic, whatever else. That people will use these phobics and isms as a weapon. They don't mean it. They don't believe it. They don't care about it. They are using this purely as a political tool. So just take like what Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton said about black people, like Hillary Clinton saying I have the hot sauce in my purse when she's on a black show, and Joe Biden, like, if you don't vote for me, you're not black. That's both pretty racist, but no one called that racist because the right people were doing it. But when someone that doesn't like says something, then all of a sudden that's racist. Like, to take the Trump example of like good people on both sides, which is like what Trump was saying was, I hate Nazis, but some good people think that we shouldn't tear down the statue. And when you take these isms and use them as a weapon, it like weakens your argument. And a really good example of this was kind of the building of the alt-right and the actual like racist wing that existed there for a bit that kind of culminated in Charlottesville, which is, have you heard of 1350? So 13% of the population, Black Americans, commits 50% of the murders. People would look this up and be like, oh my God, that seems like a really important stat. Hey, internet, can someone answer this for me? Because seeing this, it seems racist, but I'm sure there's a good, like, reasonable answer for like what's going on. And you went on the internet and asked about this, or you asked your friend or your teacher or whoever about this. And if you brought up this statistic, you were called a racist. But here's the thing. The statistic's correct. You can go on the FBI's website and you can see, like clearly 13% of the population commits 50% of the murders. And the only people that would answer this question were neo-Nazis and people on Stormfront. So what you do is you say this thing that is true, that is obviously irrefutably true, and the only people giving you an answer are Nazis, you don't even know they're Nazis. You just know they're like this group on Stormfront. And you go there and like, well, they're the only one giving me an answer, so I'm going to listen to them. And I'm going to take their advice and other things, because I know other people are lying to me, and they've at least told the truth so far. So calling too many things racist, right, anti-Semitic, whatever else, makes it harder, because eventually people are like, fuck you, I guess I am racist. And the thing that destroyed that kind of racist version of the alt-right was people like Jordan Peterson or like Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder that were able to answer that statistic without being racist. That could say, like, because on Stormfront, you would get something about IQs and animalistic natures or whatever, and then you go to like Slaughter with Crowder or whatever, and he's like, no, it's about the rate of being part of gang, or I'll give the libertarian answer, better answer. It's about that Blacks are a minority group that have been ostracized, and we created a war on drugs, and this war on drugs means that there's a lot of money to make from being in a gang, and gangs are really violent, and because Blacks are minorities, they have nothing to lose from joining gangs. So similar to how the Jews got into porn, the Blacks got into gangs. So they have a really high murder rate for that reason. Nothing racist. It's all like socioeconomic with a bit of culture mixed in, also like Nigerian Americans don't have that issue. So I know there's a big tangent, but the reason to come back around to that is when people say, if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic, it makes more anti-Semites, because you can criticize Israel and not be anti-Semitic. And it's something that, like, with what Kanye said, Prager, so Dennis Prager came out and said, hey, Kanye, you're right statistically about what percent of the media is Jewish, but you can't say that anyways because it's anti-Semitic to say that, even though you're right.
Yeah, he's doing this. You're saying he's doing the same thing, and then you can't. So then, okay,
then you're going to do is you're going to get more anti-Semites. If you say saying true things makes you an anti-Semite, you're going to get more anti-Semites. Ben Shapiro says criticizing the Federal Reserve is anti-Semitic. If you criticize the Federal Reserve at all, you're an anti-Semite. If you talk about globalists, because that was a big thing that shows, they said anyone that talks about globalists is anti-Semitic. And it's like, the more you say this stuff, the more you're going to kind of hurt Jews, because if you say everything's anti-Semitic, then we can't call out real anti-Semitism. If you say everything is racist, we can't call out real racism. And the more you can dilute the power of these words, the worse things get. So it's not that people actually care about anti-Semitism and want to cancel everyone that says something. It's that they will use it when convenient to them to reach a political goal. And if you want to see the examples of it, it is like all the Black leaders that meet with Louis Farrakhan when he's like really known for being anti-Semitic and praising Hitler and saying like, sure, he killed Jews, but he was really great economically and the Jews kind of deserved it. Or if you see stuff like there was, you're a patron of Thad, right? He had a great interview recently with, what was her name? I forget the name of he had a great interview recently with a woman who, Nicole Levitt, who was a lawyer working for a volunteer organization to protect women from sexual assault, like from like helping women escape houses. her org started doing some of that crazy diversity and inclusion shit and said, hey, if you're a white person, you have to sign this letter saying all white people are racist. The thing that she got in trouble for was that she tried to add resources about violence against Jews to the diversity and inclusion resources. They were like, hey, include anything you think is important about racism. And she put in some stuff about the recent uptick in like Black on Jewish violence. And they said, well, that's racist. You can't say anything about like how Jews are the ones getting hurt. There's actually a whole book called Jews Don't Count, written by a Jewish author that literally just goes through about like all these examples of people doing things against Jews or saying things to Jews that against other groups would be called racist. And especially lots of liberal people doing it and not caring at all about anti-Semitism. Because the thing is, they only care when it's politically convenient. So that's the weird thing about it, is like, yeah, you know what? If Kanye had been like one of the rappers that endorsed Hillary Clinton and was like, did exactly what they wanted and never had these problems, they probably wouldn't have attacked him and canceled him for what he said, because they don't care about the anti-Semitism. They care about canceling the black guy that supports Trump.
Yeah.
And I think that it fucks over Jews, because like if you call actually reporting statistics on the media racist or anti-Semitic, then like what happens when there's real anti-Semites? Nothing, I guess, because you cried wolf too many times. Sorry, I went too long there.
No, I hear you, man. So let me ask you this question, even though it's just a little curveball and baseball season is over, and but just to throw a little curveball, just because this is like a running, I didn't know this, but it's like a running thing that I've noticed. So did Anne Frank write her diaries?
I have heard the argument that wait, Anne Frank. Wait,
is it Anne Frank?
No, are you talking about
who's the girl? It was the blind, and am I saying the right name?
Helen.
Oh, my bad. Which is the one?
Anne Frank's the one in the attic. Yeah, I knew what you were talking about. And Anne Frank is.
I've heard some. Okay, I got the name wrong. Okay, there's one that they always just say like, they'll say something like, she wrote them when ballpoint pen, but the ballpoint pen wasn't invented until. And I'm like, what? Like, I've never heard. Okay, I don't even know if I'm talking about the right one, man. There's one
there's a woman that's mute, deaf, and blind, and went out and they like did a bunch of speeches about communism and socialism, but like only this one translator could translate for her. And
that one. Which was that one? Yeah. That one sounds sketchy as shit, dude. That sounds a little sketchy, man.
Yeah, I've seen a little bit on it. It sounds sketchy to me. I don't know enough.
Okay, well, I brought that up because if somebody questioned that, I should try to. I don't even know. I should have it on my note. Like, if you bring that up in polite society, you're going to get like, but if like you just look, I didn't even know that about just one translator. Like, I mean, that sounds sketchy. That sounds like there's some sketchiness there. But if you, I guess, say that, and I only brought that up as kind of like joking around about like, I was just trying to see what you would, if you had already heard that, and if you had.
I've heard the same stuff, and like I kind of buy it, but I don't know enough to like say for sure. But like I'd totally buy it that the translator was just using her as a political puppet. But I don't actually know. That is wild speculation for fun.
Yeah, but it sounds sketchy to that one translator. Is the only one that can translate. That's a funny.
Sounds sketchy. But here's the other thing: is like sometimes things sound sketchy, but they're like actually not a thing. So here's a sketchy one that people point to: is like, look at the percentage of Jews in finance and media, right? And it's like, oh my goodness, Jews are only 0.2% of the world population, but what percent of bankers, billionaires are there? Well, it's like, okay, it's almost like the 70 cents to $1 wage gap thing, where when you correct the stats, it goes away. So Jews are 0.2% of the world population, right? Well, Jews are 2.4% of the US population. But you know what? There's not like banking and finance happening everywhere in the US. Like the media is not everywhere. Like where's the media mostly based?
Well, think New York and LA or something, yeah.
So Jews are 10 to 20% of New York City. So if the Jews were 10% of stock traders and 10% of the media or 20% of the media, they would be way disproportionately to the average US, but they'd be actually pretty proportional to the rest of New York City.
Yeah.
Like there's more Jews than blacks in New York City, in spite of like, actually, there might have been at one point. I'm not sure there still is now. I know there was, but it might not be correct anymore. But it's just like when you correct some of the stats, some of this stuff goes away. Or there's a lot of kind of, so that's kind of the thing with the Jewish question. Like, oh, why is this group have so many people in positions of power? Well, it's like, one, they got kind of forced there through religious tradition, whatever, like the money lender thing, which, oh, I also want to respond really fast to the Talmud thing. Sorry, I know there's too many things. So Pete was talking about like, oh, Jews are trying to like get around and the various rules and find loopholes. So there is the Torah, right, which is the Jewish equivalent of the Bible, Old Testament. Then
That's the original. That's the original.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's this thing called the Talmud. So think of the Talmud like kind of case law or what ifs. So imagine that you had a law in the books that said you cannot kill people, right? Well, someone charged me with a gun. Can I kill them? The law says you can't kill people. Oh, but you need to actually work it out through examples. And you go and you'd be like, well, this person charges me with a gun. Can I kill them first? Yes. This person charges me with like a plastic spoon. Can I kill them first? No. And the Talmud is just this book that literally goes through everything in the Torah and says like, hey, we want to actually follow the laws. And if we do, we need to actually understand them. So we need to go through every possible scenario and spell out like, Jews can't eat pork, right?
Yeah, I've heard of that.
Okay. What if you were making a big pot of soup?
Why not? Why not? It's just a religious thing.
Yeah. So in the Torah, it says that certain things are unclean. You can only eat land animals that have split hooves, or no, you can't eat anything with split hooves. So you can eat like pigs and sheep, or you can eat sheep and cows, but you can't eat pork. Or like for things in the ocean, they have to have like fins and scales. So you can eat fish, but not like lobsters. There's like a list of birds you can and can eat, a list of bugs you can and can eat. It's a whole thing. I mean, lots of religions have that. It's not just Jews. But it's just like, okay, you have a big pot of soup, right? Some non-Jewish person comes up and like puts a piece of pork in your soup. Do you have to throw away the whole soup? Right? Like that's a question that like they actually go through and answer. It's weird.
Oh, I didn't know that's what that book was about. Or I understand when you say it like in case law. Yeah, it's like the what ifs, like you said. No, I didn't know what that was. So that's where the a lot of the lending and the banking and some of that stuff comes into play because the what ifs are in there. Like if well then what does it say?
Well, just like when could you lend or not lend money? And I think like the thing kind of worked out was like you could not lend money to other Jews, but you could lend it to like non-Jews. Then there's some other like things in there.
And charge interest or interest and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, so that was kind of this stuff worked out. I don't totally understand it. I'm not that well read on it. And actually, so do you know Ari Shaffir, the comedian?
Yeah.
He just put out a special is called Jew. So he was like born Orthodox Jewish and like went to Hebrew school for like 15 years and whatever, and did a comedy special just all about Judaism and growing up and all this stuff. And it is hilarious and it is free on YouTube. And I would recommend watching if you want to know more about Jewish culture. That would be much funnier than I could ever be. Because
I'll check that out. You know what? We're getting close to some of our time here, so I wanted to kind of go down maybe a couple of different questions and just some interesting things that when we were talking in the men's group that I found fascinating that you had told me about and one of them was I thought it was cool. I thought that's the way it should be. You had mentioned that. I believe you. Now, tell me if I'm wrong. That like it's culturally normal, or because I think you've done it like where you guys. When I say you guys, you guys practice like, hey, we have drills on when somebody dies, or not drills, but like when somebody passes, like
that's not a Jewish thing. That's
that's like a normal like want to keep your wealth thing.
No, that's a personal finance thing. So it's a kind of more common thing. No, so I read a bunch of like self-help and like improvement stuff. And one of the things I recommend for personal finance is that you should practice if someone dies, like where is the will and who has what and power of attorney and things. It's totally like a personal finance thing, not a Jewish
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, maybe because it came from you, I thought, okay. I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's okay. That's a
yeah,
personal finance thing. Oh, that's funny.
personal finance.
Um, yeah, because I was telling my buddy, I was telling him like, yeah, I'm gonna interview this guy, and I was like, dude, I think they practice drills on how to, and we started laughing. We're like, oh shit. I was like, Mexicans just when somebody dies, we just have plate sales to figure out how to pay for the coffin.
You do have some stuff mixed in that's more like kind of culturally. So there's this. So Passover is one of the biggest Jewish holidays. And during it, one of the nights you'll do like a dinner, and you'll take this piece of bread, matzah bread, and you'll wrap it up and hide it, called the afikomen. And the kids have to find it. And when the kids find it, they have to sell it back to the parents. So until the parents get back the bread, dinner doesn't end. They can't leave the table. So you bargain with your parents and try to get as much as you can out of them. And like some families will be like, oh, like $2-3, like kind of be nice. And then some families will go like, we want 2 puppies and a bike and whatever. So there's some cultural.
What's the lesson behind there? What is the lesson that's trying to be taught in that in Passover? Like, because it's like the two generations are interplaying, right? The kids and the adults, right? A little bit. What's the lesson that's trying to be?
Well, a lot of it is kind of just teaching how to like back and forth and interact well. Of like some of the other stuff in Passover is there's like the wise kid ask this question, and like the kid doesn't know how to ask a question, ask this, and you actually like kind of practice out like how do you have a good Socratic conversation. But stuff with that is like, I don't know. What has your kids, have they ever learned how to negotiate with something? Have you ever given them a situation where they actually have enough power that they can like bargain with you?
No.
Yeah.
But that's probably it's probably interesting. Like, yeah, I should let that play out. Yeah. Passover over here on the Mexican side over here. That's funny. Oh man. Yeah, that's true, man. Yeah. You just put them in different situations,
Yeah.
to kind of play it out. Uh, another one, well, not another one, but, another one that I kind of found fascinating. And, this is just comes from watching Curb Your Enthusiasm, man. Really, man. And it ties into the one I just said was like, I had never really heard of the idea of there's been one episode where I guess he's gonna pass away, right? And I guess his rabbi is there next to him, and it ties a little bit to what I was saying right now is that like the rabbi goes like, "Hey, is your house in order?" And I had never really kind of and then I understood later what that meant, like, are all your finances in order? Is everybody, all that stuff, and that kind of conversation, just like how Kanye might have been like, I find that like good that
Yeah.
people do that. I know you said right now that's more of a financial planning thing, but in my culture, that really doesn't go down. You don't really talk like that. Like, you're dying or something. Like people are like, you don't really say, hey, you got all your shit in order. Is everybody, that just doesn't happen in our culture, man. Like I said, it's funny. We're figuring out who's gonna pay for the funeral. Like, yeah, who has money to ask for a loan, to pay for Theo's funeral or something like. It's just culturally different. So I don't know, man.
Yeah.
I guess I do find a lot of that fascinating, and not even and more than fascinating. I think a lot of that should be learned really by whoever is interested in always making sure your house is in order and different things like that. I don't know. I guess my question is kind of like, I don't know, man. Like,
It's that you want to take care of your family, that you have that strong bond, and that also like death isn't something to be afraid of, but something that you kind of embrace and like work with, and that a lot of like the Jewish passages around death are like really positive and kind of like the celebration of life, and people come and spend time with the remaining family members. So there is a lot of that of like it's more normal for like Jews to like talk about finances with their kids, and like here is how our money works and here's what we're doing. And like part of that's being Jewish, but part of that was also just like a lot of Jewish families like growing up working together like in a shop owned by the dad. So it's
yeah,
kind of like a mix of stuff in there that I definitely think is one of the like the really good sides. But then like it's all a mix. And the thing is, and the other thing is like just Jews aren't that weird. Everyone has some weird religious stuff mixed in, everyone has these things. and you get that really neat stuff around like death and family, then you also get like really ugly racism where like members of my family, like my side of the family was kind of excommunicated a bit because of my grandfather not being Jewish. That like my great aunts, like when he was gone on a business trip, switched all the locks and told him his wife had left him and like got them to separate and did this kind of stuff. So it's like it's all a weird mix.
Yeah. So yeah, everybody has the family of drama. So I mean, drama in their family. Yeah, man. So in closing, man, I'm just more interested in all this stuff. I have no beef with anybody. I like to hear all different types of angles. I don't completely align or accept the idea like, oh, blame the Jews, because I've never tried to make myself like whatever I do have or don't have, it's probably mostly because of my doing or my immediate family's interactions in life or whatever. I don't know that many Jews. I know you. I'd like to think that you're a homie, and I just want to say that thank you for coming on. And yeah, man, feel free to plug anything you got going on. I know you always got some stuff going on in the Libertarian Party. I don't know how good you guys did or didn't do. I know these voting the day after voting always kind of puts a reality check on a lot of fronts. But I don't know, man. Go ahead and freestyle anything that you got going on or that you want to shine some light on, man.
Yeah. So I'll do one like fast final plug on kind of arguments for this, where it's like, I don't think people should be afraid of the Jewish question of like, if someone wants to ask, hey, why are they overrepresented here? They should be allowed to ask. Stopping people from asking, canceling them, just like nothing is going to make Kanye more convinced the Jews are evil than what happened to him after like he said stuff. And that a lot of these questions just have answers. Like, I don't know, there's lots of countries that have a really big porn industry that have no Jews. Like Japan has no Jews. It has lots of porn. Like the Jews didn't create porn. It's been around forever. Like this is kind of weird to me, some of it. But other stuff to plug. Watch Ari Shaffir's special Jew. Like honestly, really good, really funny. And he's putting it out for free, so you have no excuse not to. Libertarian Party. If you are interested in getting involved right now, we're actually trying to start a campaign to run at the grassroots level. So really support lots of people to run local elections, change things, which I know like Pete and I are both totally on board with. I don't think he'd have any disagreements with taking over your local city council. And there is, I think it's runasklibertarian.com is the website put up with the Mises Caucus for this. And overall, just like, I don't know, just keep asking questions, but also like, there are lots of answers out there. If you just look, you'll find them.
Perfect, man. Thank you for coming on, Drake. And Drake is a unique name, man. I know a rapper named Drake, and I know a homie named Drake. So thanks for coming on, man.
Happy to.
Peace.